There's a moment that almost every dog owner has experienced, even if they didn't fully understand it at the time, when you look directly at your dog expecting some kind of response, and instead of wagging their tail or coming closer, they suddenly freeze, their body going still as if time itself paused for a second. At first, it can feel confusing, and depending on the situation, even a little unsettling, because it doesn't match the image we usually have of dogs as expressive, reactive, and emotionally transparent animals, always eager to engage, always ready to respond. But that stillness, that exact moment when your dog locks up under your gaze, is not random, and it's definitely not meaningless. In fact, that freeze is communication. And more than that, it's one of the most honest signals your dog can give you, because unlike barking or jumping, which can be influenced by excitement or habit, freezing comes from a much deeper, more instinctive layer of their psychology. What makes this even more important is that most people completely misread this behavior, interpreting it as guilt, stubbornness, or even defiance, when in reality it often has nothing to do with disobedience. It has everything to do with perception. Because when you look at your dog, you're not just looking in the human sense of the word. From your dog's perspective, you're sending a very specific kind of signal, one that carries weight, intention, and sometimes even pressure. And depending on how your dog interprets that signal, their response can shift instantly from relaxed to alert, from safe to uncertain, from fluid to completely still. So if your dog freezes when you look at them, the real question is not what's wrong with them. The real question is, what exactly are they seeing in you? To understand why your dog freezes under your gaze, you have to momentarily step out of the human way of interpreting eye contact and step into a world where staring is not neutral, not casual, and definitely not meaningless. In the animal world, especially among mammals, direct eye contact carries intensity, and in many situations, it can signal pressure, challenge, or uncertainty, depending on context, posture, and prior experience. When you look straight at your dog, holding your gaze even for a couple of seconds, your dog is not interpreting that as affection the way humans often do, because for them, a fixed stare can feel like a moment that demands a decision. And that decision is simple but deeply instinctive. Do I move, or do I stay still? That pause you see, that freeze, is your dog processing that exact question in real time, because movement in the wrong moment, under the wrong kind of attention, can escalate tension in natural canine communication. So instead of reacting impulsively, many dogs choose the safest possible option. They stop. Freezing, in this context, is not weakness and it's not confusion. It's control. It's your dog choosing not to escalate whatever they think might be happening, even if, from your perspective, nothing is happening at all. And this becomes even more pronounced if your dog has learned, consciously or not, that your gaze sometimes precedes correction, commands, or changes in tone, because now your eyes are no longer just visual contact. They become a predictor, a signal that something is about to happen. So your dog pauses, locks in, and waits, not because they don't know what to do, but because they're trying to choose the safest possible response before doing anything at all. And that moment of stillness is where their psychology is fully exposed. If you've ever felt like your dog understands you without words or reacts to subtle changes in your behavior, there's a reason for that. And if you're interested in exploring more about how dogs read human signals on a deeper level, consider subscribing to the channel, because this kind of awareness changes not just how your dog behaves, but how you relate to them every single day. One of the biggest mistakes people make when they see a dog freeze is assuming that the dog is either feeling guilty or being stubborn, because from a human perspective, stillness in a tense moment often looks like hesitation tied to wrongdoing. But dogs don't experience guilt the way humans do, and more importantly, they don't freeze as a way of admitting fault. What you're actually seeing is part of a much older system, something deeply rooted in survival, often referred to as the freeze response, which sits right between fight and flight. When your dog freezes, their body is not shutting down. It's doing the opposite. It's becoming highly alert, highly aware, and extremely controlled, because stillness allows them to gather information without escalating the situation. In the wild, unnecessary movement can attract attention, trigger conflict, or signal challenge. So freezing becomes a strategic pause, a way of staying under the radar while assessing what comes next. Now bring that into your home. You look at your dog, maybe your posture is slightly rigid, maybe your tone earlier was a bit sharper, maybe your dog is holding something they're not supposed to have, and suddenly your presence carries a different kind of weight. Your dog feels it instantly. So instead of running or reacting, they hold still. Not because they're plotting anything, and not because they're trying to test you, but because they are regulating the moment. They are choosing the least risky option available. And here's where it gets even more important. The more your dog associates your gaze with tension, correction, or unpredictability, the faster and more frequently this freeze response will appear, because your presence itself becomes a trigger for caution. So what looks like a simple pause is actually a complex calculation happening in your dog's mind, where every movement matters and every second is used to decide what keeps them safest. Every time your dog freezes under your gaze, something subtle but powerful is being reinforced, and most of the time, it's not what the owner thinks they are teaching. Because from your dog's perspective, patterns matter more than isolated moments, and if your eye contact is frequently followed by commands, corrections, changes in tone, or even emotional tension, your dog begins to associate your gaze with uncertainty rather than safety. This means that the freeze response stops being just an instinct and starts becoming a learned expectation. Your dog is no longer asking what is happening right now, but instead anticipating what usually happens next when you look at me like that. And anticipation, especially when it leans toward unpredictability, creates hesitation. That hesitation is what you see as stillness. Over time, this can subtly reshape your dog's behavior in ways that go beyond that single moment, because a dog that frequently enters a freeze state around their owner may begin to move less freely, offer fewer spontaneous behaviors, and become more dependent on cues before acting. In other words, they stop expressing and start waiting. And while that might look like obedience on the surface, it often comes from caution, not confidence. Confident dogs move, explore, and engage without constantly second-guessing the consequences of their actions, whereas dogs that freeze regularly are often trying to avoid making the wrong move. So the real shift doesn't happen in your dog. It happens in how your dog interprets you. Your posture, your timing, your tone, and even the duration of your gaze all contribute to whether your dog feels safe to act or safer to stay still. And once you start seeing it this way, that frozen moment stops being something strange or concerning and starts becoming feedback. Clear, immediate feedback about how your dog is experiencing you in that exact second. So now, the next time your dog freezes when you look at them, instead of reacting immediately, instead of calling them out or assuming something is wrong, there's a different way to experience that moment, one that completely changes the dynamic between you and your dog. Because that stillness is not empty. It's not disobedience. It's not distance. It's awareness. It's your dog reading you, measuring the situation, trying to understand what your presence means right now, and more importantly, what it might mean in the next few seconds. And that gives you something most people don't realize they have. Influence. Not the kind that comes from commands or control, but the kind that comes from perception, from the way your dog interprets your energy, your posture, your timing, and your intention before you even say a word. So instead of asking why your dog freezes, what happens if you soften your gaze, relax your body, and remove that pressure from the moment? What happens if your presence stops feeling like a signal that demands a decision and starts feeling like something predictable, something neutral, or even something safe? Does your dog stay frozen, or do they begin to move again, naturally, without hesitation, without waiting? And if that shift happens, even subtly, then maybe the freeze was never the problem. Maybe it was the message. And now the real question becomes, what kind of message do you want your dog to read when they look back at you?